He's the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Of course, the big news, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, the first woman Chief of Staff in history who very ably helmed Donald Trump's comeback bid for the presidency in 2024, has been diagnosed early, thank God, with breast cancer. The president putting out a statement saying Susie Wiles, an incredible chief of staff, a great person, and one of the strongest people I know, but unfortunately has been diagnosed with early breast cancer and has decided to take this challenge immediately as opposed to waiting. She has a fantastic medical team and her prognosis is excellent. During the treatment period, she will be spending virtually full time at the White House, which makes me, as president, very happy. Her strength and her commitment to continue doing the job she loves and does so well while undergoing these treatments tells you everything you need to know about Susie Wiles. Susie, as one of my closest and most important advisors, is tough and deeply committed to serving the American people. She will soon be better than ever. Melania and I are with her in every way, and we look forward to working with Susie on the many big and wonderful things that are happening for the benefit of our country, signed President Donald Trump. Now, Susie Wiles has a long and fabled political history. She's, of course, the daughter of the famous sportscaster Pat Summerall, but she really first came to political prominence when she successfully elected outsider Rick Scott to the governorship of Florida. Rick Scott was a hospital executive who wanted to serve. The party favorite was Attorney General Bill McCollum, but Rick Scott, with the able help of Susie Wiles, came out of nowhere to win not only the nomination, but then to elect Rick Scott, who went on to become both a great conservative governor of Florida and later on a U.S. senator. That brought Susie Wiles to the attention of Donald Trump. In 2016, Susie Wiles could have worked for Marco Rubio, could have worked for Governor Jeb Bush of her home state of Florida. Instead, she went to work for Donald Trump. And frankly, if she had not been parachuted into Florida in the closing days of the 2016 race, I doubt that Trump would have carried the state. Then, of course, the president asked Susie Wiles to go into the campaign of Ron DeSantis because it was a fiasco. DeSantis had been endorsed by Donald Trump in 2018. Now, what Donald Trump never knew was that in 2016, when they were both on the ballot, Ron DeSantis refused to endorse Donald Trump, fearing that Trump would somehow pull the ticket down. In fact, in the end, Trump won bigger in DeSantis' district than DeSantis won. But once Trump became president, DeSantis decided to reinvent himself as a stout defender of Donald Trump in the Russian collusion hoax, and a last-minute endorsement by Donald Trump actually catapulted Ron DeSantis to the governor's nomination. Virtually every Republican county chairman, every Republican state senator, every member of the House, all the members of Congress, other than my friend Matt Gaetz, had endorsed Adam Putnam, who was the favorite. But Putnam himself said the endorsement by Trump of Ron DeSantis was like a seismic nuclear explosion. And of course, then President Trump had to come to Florida to drag Ron DeSantis over the finish line by a mere 15,000 votes out of, I think it was 5.5 million cast. But it was at the request of Donald Trump that Susie Wiles joined the DeSantis entourage, and she was really the one who engineered DeSantis's narrow victory. Only several months later, to be thrown to the curbs, Susie Wiles was working quite ably as an advisor to the state Republican committee, to Ron DeSantis' super PAC, to President Trump's reelection campaign, and holding down a full-time job as a public affairs consultant and lobbyist when for reasons no one has really understood, Casey DeSantis went on a rampage, and Susie Wiles was dismissed from all of those jobs on the same day. Not many Republicans wanted to defend Susie Wiles then, but if you look it up in Politico, I said, and I quote, Ron DeSantis will rue the day he did this, and indeed it was so. When Donald Trump decided that he was going to run for the White House again, the first person he called was Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles eagerly signed on what on paper I think should have looked like a near impossible task, but then teaming with the extraordinarily capable Chris LaCivita and with the help of, in my opinion, the best pollster today in the Republican Party, the best survey researcher, among the best strategists, New York's own Tony Fabrizio, they ran a near perfect campaign. And during the campaign, Susie Wiles was also much maligned. People kept insisting we weren't prepared for election integrity when we were. People kept insisting that the party, that the campaign didn't know what they were doing. Corey Lewandowski launched at least one failed coup attempt to take over the campaign. That was slapped down relatively quickly. And of course, Susie Wiles emerged a winner. Now, I must tell you, as someone who has known Donald Trump for over 50 years, Susie Wiles has that elusive quality in that she knows her client. You see, Donald Trump is not handled, he's not managed, he's not scripted, he's not cajoled, he's not led any place. He asks for information, but he's very much his own man. The only thing that you can say, the only thing I have to say, the only thing predictable about Donald Trump is he's completely unpredictable. And Susie Wiles has brought order into what in the 2016 and the 2020 campaign was chaos. So there's a system in place for information to be synthesized, for the president to be given options. Susie Wiles, I think, like every presidential chief of staff, she takes the heat for things she had nothing to do with. No one ever wants to say, the president made a stupid mistake here. So instead they say, well, the president must be getting bad advice. That's part of the job. But people need to understand if there had been no Susie Wiles, there would never have been the great alliance with RFK and the Maha movement. Susie Wiles was one of the earliest advocates, told me all about the books of Casey and Callie Means and how your diet can change your life. And indeed, in my case, it has. Susie Wiles has been a major supporter of the Maha agenda. But most specifically, it was Susie Wiles who negotiated the alliance in which Donald Trump and at that point Robert F. Kennedy, who had qualified on many ballots to run as independent, teamed up post-Butler. It was Susie Wiles who negotiated that deal. Now, as someone who is very early into the health choice movement, my family and I are praying for Susie Wiles. What the president said is true. She's the toughest person I know. When Susie Wiles looks at you, you don't know whether she's about to break your kneecaps or bake you a casserole. She's been a friend of mine for 30 years. We worked together in Ronald Reagan's campaign for president in 1980. We worked together in Jack Kemp's campaign in 1988. She is an incredibly capable and organized woman. And I hope that she will avail herself of some of the alternative treatments. My wife is a cancer survivor. I've talked about it here in the Stone Zone. And I'm convinced that her life was saved by a combination of both Eastern and Western medicines. I also think that there are, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving any medical advice to anyone, but there are drugs like menbendazole, which is a derivative of fenbendazole, which is an FDA-approved drug. I think it is. This would be an off-label use. It's approved for use with animals. So it was with ivermectin. Ivermectin, of course, won a Nobel Peace Prize. It saved so many lives. Also, I believe studies show it quite effective against cancer. So I pray for Susie Wiles. I know she will beat this. She's the most effective White House chief of staff in history, and because she understands Donald Trump. She understands how he wants the flow of information to go. She has the hardest job in the world because, as I say, Trump is not some marionette. He is very, very much his own man. She ran, in my opinion, probably the best Republican campaign for the presidency in American history, and we here at the Stone Zone wish her a speedy recovery, although it sounds to me like she's going to stay on the job. I'm glad I was able to clear up some of the false attacks on her, this idea that she was a lobbyist for Pfizer. That's another one of my favorite ones. She worked for a short time as a partner, not a stakeholder or an equity holder, in a 346-person firm. She did not represent Pfizer. Someone else in the firm did. That was for a brief period. So this idea that she's a big pharma agent, that's a slur, and it's a falsehood. I don't think Trump would have won this election without her and her excellent judgment. So I'm enjoying watching what's happening in Cuba as Donald Trump puts on the economic pressure. The communist government there is now preparing for a major economic shift that would allow Cuban Americans to invest in private businesses on the island. This is an apparent response to mounting pressure from the United States, an apparent response to the fact that they have lost about 80% of their oil with Trump taking control of Venezuela. So short on food, short on oil, short on everyday necessities, a pair of tires for a car, non-existent in Cuba. Socialism is failing, and the Cubans are very clearly cognizant of what just happened in Venezuela. There are reports that officials could soon announce these reforms, which would allow Cubans living abroad, including many who live in South Florida, to own and invest in small companies. In other words, they need a dose of capitalism to save the communist utopia. The embargo works because, you see, if you were, say, a Spanish company and you partnered with somebody in Cuba to do business, you had to partner with the government. You paid the government dollars, they paid the workers pesos, and they used the overage to pay for the police state and the authoritarian state that spies on and oppresses the Cuban people. This is a much, much better idea in terms of opening Cuba up. Donald Trump, very consistent on this. They begged him to build hotels and casinos there in the 80s, and he said that he would love to do so, but not until the Cuban people were free. It looks to me like that's going to be sooner rather than later. There will be great celebration in the Stone household because my wife, Nidia Bertrand de Espinoza Stone, is a proud Cuban American and a longtime foe of the Castro regime. Overall, I think Marco Rubio, President Donald Trump have to be given enormous credit for taking on narco-Marxism in our hemisphere. They did it in Honduras. They did it in Venezuela. Now they're in the process of doing it in Cuba. It is a delight to see. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks with prayers for our good friend Susie Wiles, probably the most effective campaign manager and White House Chief of Staff in American history, and she's very tough. She'll be back, and so will we. Don't go away.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a very, one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And you're back in the Stone Zone. We're watching events unfold in communist Cuba, just 90 miles from our shores. The Cuban leader, Miguel Diaz-Canel, actually confirmed Friday that officials of his government in Havana are holding formal talks with Washington and suggested that the government is looking for ways to involve Cubans living abroad in rebuilding the struggling economy. Translation, they're out of cash. After decades of social mismanagement, Cuba's economy is a basket case. Infrastructure is crumbling, shortages are widespread, there are rolling blackouts of power, Nearly 2 million Cubans, both young and educated, have fled the country for lack of opportunity. Supporters of reform say Cuban Americans could provide the investment, the skill, and expertise needed to revive the island's private sector. Now, Havana has a very long history of renouncing reforms only to reverse themselves. But there's a new sheriff in town. That's Donald J. Trump and his able deputy, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And if they know that if they back off, the Maduro treatment is entirely possible. This is an incredible success of President Trump's peace through strength foreign policy that is quickly remaking Latin America. If you look across the region, whether it is in Argentina, whether it is in Chile, or whether it is in Honduras, or whether it is any place in this hemisphere, freedom is on the march. And the Lula regime seems to me to be teetering, the last large Marxist regime in the region. Much of this can be given, I think, can be attributed to the strong leadership of President Trump in this hemisphere. At the same time, he is warning our American allies that the future of NATO could be at stake if they refuse to help secure the vital Straits of Hormuz. You know, the Straits of Hormuz up there by Iran, about 40% of the nation's oil passes through there on any given day. And the president says it's only fair that nations who benefit from that sea lane of trade also pay to defend it. He called on China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. Well, the Chinese support the Iraqis, so I don't think they'll be coming to play. The Iranians, but I don't think they'll be coming to play. But the president's calling on others to deploy their naval forces to the region to help guarantee free passage. Now, oil prices have bubbled up. John Catsimatidis of United Refining gave a great interview the other day, which he said he thinks it is temporary and a small price to pay. General Michael Flynn also told us right here in the Stone Zone he thought the U.S. Navy would ultimately prevail and keep the waterways open. So I think this is a blip. What's outrageous is the way Democrats are pointing to it and cheering. You'd think they would love their country and want low gas and oil prices, but instead they just want anything that Trump has done to fail. That's called Trump derangement syndrome. See it every single day. Right here on the Stone Zone, Roger Stone calling him as he sees him. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with a bit more politics on the other side.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. So far, President Donald Trump's foreign policy has not been recycled neoconservatism. He has used American power in a very limited, very focused, but very lethal way. First in Iran, then, of course, in Venezuela, now once again in Iran. No boots on the ground, no heavy American casualties, no multi-billion-dollar contracts for defense contractors like Halliburton and General Dynamics and others. He and his generals insist this war will be short. We pray that they are correct about that, in which case I think the American people will continue to support it. Despite the fact that Donald Trump was elected as a non-interventionist, on the issue of action specifically against Iran, he has been consistent since as early as 1988. So those who think this is some new gene really doesn't understand him. The Iranians have killed thousands of Americans. There was those murdered at the Marine barracks in Beirut. In 1981, there was, of course, the attack on the USS Cole, the attack on the World Trade Center. This is a long and bloody history. and the treatment of their own people, the brutality of the way they held power, I think, hastened these attacks. On the other hand, they continue to have the capacity to fire both drones and rockets. So while we may have wounded them, perhaps fatally, as the velocity of their attacks are down substantially, they are still capable of launching both drone and missile attacks at their Arab nations, and specifically at the Straits of Hormuz. Now, I think the Straits of Hormuz are crucial here. The president knew that they would move immediately, as they promised, to try to close the straits. Right here on this show, General Michael Flynn assured us that he believed the U.S. Navy had the capacity to keep the straits clear. President Donald Trump, as I said earlier, called on other nations who have the same interests that we have on the free flow of commerce, particularly energy, through the straits. Before long, the Iranian Navy, I think, will be so degraded that they'll no longer be able to cause us problems there. I was happy to see John Catsimatidis, who owns United Refining, knows a great deal about energy, is one of the businesses he's in, say that he thought that this increase in oil prices was temporary and it would be a blip and worth paying for the larger benefit of liberating the people of Iran. New intelligence suggests there's deep turmoil at the top of the current ruling regime following the death of the longtime supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini, who was essentially vaporized by a drone, along with 40 of his henchmen during one of the opening strikes of the U.S.-Israel conflict earlier this month. It's really quite interesting the way the Trump administration seems to have lured all of them to one location where they could decapitate the head of the snake, but it appears that's exactly what they've done. It is now reported that the late Ayatollah Khomeini, not to be confused with the Ayatollah Khomeini, that's the guy who seized and held 254 American hostages in 1979. Or not to be confused with the current Khomeini, who is Mojtaba Khomeini, the Supreme Leader's son, who's now the top man. There's a lot of questions about his inexperience, whether he's prepared to lead. There are even some rumors, unfounded, or I should say unverified, that he is a closeted homosexual, which of course in that culture would mean death. Despite the aforementioned problems, Ali's ruling clerical council moved very quickly after Trump zapped Ali Khamenei's death to name the son as the country's new leader. That decision marks a controversial moment in Iran's political history since 1979, led by the Ruhollah Khomeini, was supposed to end heredity-style rule. That was part of the argument of the mullahs, that the Pahlavis was a monarchy and the monarchy was bad. U.S. officials believed that the son, now in charge, may have survived the initial attacks by the U.S. U.S. officials believe that he was, however, severely injured in the Israeli missile strike that killed his father. He's believed to be essentially a figurehead with real authority now resting in Iran's super hardline Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is directing the regime responses as the conflict continues. President Trump has publicly dismissed a young Khomeini who is supposedly, we've injured one of his legs. The reports are that he has been hospitalized, and suggested that Iran's leadership structure is collapsing under pressure from the United States. The U.S. government has now offered a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the location of the current leader, Khomeini, and other senior Iranian officials. My guess, of course, is that our intelligence officers and the Israelis know exactly where they are. This is a pressure tactic on the regime. they're constantly looking skyward, as you might imagine. The chaos inside Iran shows the regime is increasingly unstable. It appears to be on the verge of breaking. The Iranian people may be fully liberated before long, but this is very far from over. Those who believe it is over. Politically, it has to be a short engagement, but Donald Trump has demonstrated his skillful use of overwhelming force. On the other hand, he says there are no more targets to hit. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but he has remade our military into a lethal fighting force. They proved that in Venezuela, and we have to see how this plays out. I think that the American people have no appetite for a long, drawn-out war, but I think Donald Trump, of all people, understands that. It is the platform on which he was elected, and it has been a watchword of his political career, particularly those wars that he criticized as being about regime change. He's explained why Venezuela is not about regime change, why Iran is not about regime change. And I think the American people are with him in this end to these deadly maniacs. They were playing for time. I think it is absolutely accurate they were building nuclear weapons. I think we set them back with our earlier attacks, but they're now confirmation they had enough enriched uranium to build 11 devices, and their Chinese friends most likely would provide them the ability to propel that to most American cities. It is a threat that is very, very real. You know, I used to really enjoy watching the Oscars. I'm not a giant movie fan, but I like to see what people wore when they show up, particularly the gentlemen. There was a day when every movie star went to the Oscars wearing a resplendent dinner jacket, what plebeians call a tuxedo, and of course a black tie. And you saw all your favorite stars completely decked out, the women wearing, of course, long gowns. Hollywood gathered for the 2026 Oscars this week, but the ceremony served mostly as a reminder that the entertainment industry is increasingly out of control and out of touch with the American people, and really functions as a propaganda arm for the deep state. Since 2019, inflation-adjusted box office revenues have reportedly dropped by almost 40%, while theater attendance has been cut in half. That's because people are rejecting the godless, pornographic, woke fare being served up by the big studios in Hollywood. I think the decline reflects the growing frustration with an industry that prioritizes political messaging over storytelling, fueling the familiar refrain of "go woke, go broke," as others before me have said. Comedian Conan O'Brien, of course, hosted the ceremony and quickly took shots at conservatives. His monologue, including jokes aimed at alternative entertainment events promoted by Turning Point USA. Thanks for the free advertising, Conan. He also, throughout the night, took many, many pot shots at Donald Trump and U.S. foreign policy. Several winners, of course, took their 15 minutes to criticize military action involving Iran while conveniently glossing over the Iranian government's violent crackdown on its own citizens. That did not seem to bother them. Among the night's biggest awards, Best Picture went to One Battle After Another, a film lionizing far-left Antifa domestic terrorism. Despite receiving the fawning praise from Hollywood insiders, the movie has reportedly lost about $100 million at the box office. Yes, that's the film that got Best Picture. It's lost $100 million. What does that tell you about where America is headed? It's clear to me that Hollywood's values no longer align with those in the middle. We saw this during the Super Bowl when the NFL offered us Bad Bunny, a neo-pornographic, I guess maybe we call that, reggaeton singer whose lewd lyrics I couldn't let my granddaughter hear when it was translated around our dinner table. So they have very much lost touch with their constituencies. And you could see the narcissism in the room. They see the Oscars as an opportunity to promote a politically correct agenda. I think it is a tragedy. Meanwhile, I read about a grieving California family taking legal action now against the Los Angeles Unified School District, accusing the school officials of hiding critical information about their son's gender identity from them, decisions they say contributed to a tragedy that destroyed their family. According to a federal lawsuit, Dylan Parker, a student at Palisades Charter High School, told staff during the 2019-2020 school year that he wanted to be called Aria and use female pronouns as he began identifying as transgender. His parents, Kathleen Mulligan and Andrew Park, say school staff deliberately kept that information from them. The parents say their son had already been diagnosed with depression and was especially vulnerable to outside influence. In an email to the school, Mulligan expressed concerns that their son, Dylan, might be struggling with deeper mental health issues and could be easily influenced by peers. She stressed that she was not opposed to transgender individually, but believed her son needed careful support and parental involvement. According to the lawsuit filed against the school district ignored the parents and instead affirmed the transition without notifying either parent or including them in any of the decisions about their minor child's treatment. The complaint alleges staff even provided information about housing resources for LGBT youth, further distancing the teenager from his family. Dylan Park sadly died by suicide on March 2024 at the age of 19. His parents say the secrecy created division at their home, and that is why they brought the lawsuit. Now, this is not an anti-LGBT story. It is about parents being involved in every decision of a minor child's life. I think that is only right. The lawsuit comes as the courts continue to scrutinize California's policies that actually restrict schools from informing parents about children's gender identity activities. These, seems to me, to risk sideline families but put vulnerable children at greatest risk to predators. School administrators have drunk their Kool-Aid and they're putting the health of our children in jeopardy. I think it is outrageous, but then it is, after all, Gavin Newsom's California. Just remember, Gavin Newsom, he would do for America what he's done for California, which is to say, drive it into the toilet. I don't know how this guy thinks he's running for president on his record of failure, but coming up soon, massive revelations about missing money, millions and millions and millions of state funding disappearing into thin air, disappearing into Gavin Newsom's political machine. I'm Roger Stone, you're listening to The Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
This is The Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
This is The Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get him his own. It's The Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in The Stone Zone. A new government report reveals just how costly New York City's homelessness crisis has become, and taxpayers are footing the bill. According to a report by the Office of Thomas P. DiNapoli, the state comptroller, the city spent roughly $81,000 per homeless person last year through the programs run by New York City's Department of Homeless Services. So in total, the city spent around $368 million on services aimed at people living on the streets, more than triple the $102 million spent in 2019. Despite the massive increases in spending, the number of unsheltered homeless individuals actually rose by about 26% during the same period, climbing from roughly 3,600 in 2019 to more than 4,500 in 2025. The report highlights the troubling reality. New York taxpayers are now spending nearly twice as much per homeless person as the city spends educating a public school student. Much of the new spending is going towards so-called low-barrier shelters and drop-in centers. Programs allow individuals to come in and eat and go freely, get a shower, sometimes providing temporary sleeping space. Critics argue the system offers services without addressing the root causes of homelessness. Former city controller Scott Stringer said the numbers raise serious questions about accountability. With this level of spending, even Stringer, a liberal Democrat, argued the city should be seeing far better results. Meanwhile, New York's overall homeless population has surged during 80% during 2019, driven in part, of course, by migration and the ongoing housing crisis, with costs expecting to climb to $456 million by 2026, thanks to Socialist Mayor Zoran Mamdani. The homeless situation will only be getting drastically worse in the years to come. This is what the people of New York have voted for, and it is very clear that we are going to experience both a crime crisis and a homeless crisis under this administration. We're also going to have a massive housing crisis because of the legislation that prohibits a landlord from selling his property without first offering it to the city. And then even when the city allows him to put it on the market after taking a pass, he has to give the landlord has to give the city like last look. This is insanity. I also think it's unconstitutional. It is an unconstitutional control of private property rights, but then private property rights don't really matter much to this mayor. I think you've just seen the beginnings of these problems as they attempt to drive a woke agenda in New York City. And it remains to be seen how much Mayor Mamdani is going to step up for Kathy Hochul. They seem to have a mutual non-aggression, or I should say mutual endorsement pact that will make any Republican's success in the governor's race far, far more difficult. But we'll be covering all of it right here at the Stone Zone at the Red Apple Audio Networks, whether it's New York politics or national politics or New Jersey politics or California politics. You get it all right here in the Stone Zone. We talk politics, news, history, culture, say that advisedly, and style. Thanks for joining us today. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.